Well, folks, buckle up, because the economic circus is back in town, and the Federal Reserve is, once again, juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope over a pit of hungry alligators. Welcome to Boss Economics World, where we call out the clowns, expose the ringmasters, and shine a light on the economic dumpster fire that our so-called leaders keep fueling. Today, we're diving headfirst into the Fed's latest masterclass in indecision, because apparently, sitting on our hands is now the gold standard of economic policy. Spoiler alert, it's not the economy that's uncertain, it's the Fed's spine. Let's break this down, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, gather round, because the Federal Reserve has just served us a piping hot dish of economic jargon, sprinkled with a generous helping of inaction, and garnished with a side of, we'll figure it out later. On May 20, 2025, at the Atlanta Fed's Financial Markets Conference, San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly and Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack gave us a front-row seat to what can only be described as a masterclass in dodging responsibility. Their message? Let's just sit tight, folks, because moving too fast might actually require us to make a decision. Now, for the uninitiated, let me translate this Fed speak into plain English. We have no idea what's going on, so let's just hope the economy sorts itself out. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is teetering on the edge of a cliff, with warning signs flashing brighter than a Las Vegas casino. But hey, why act when you can just assess incoming data until the cows come home, right? Wrong. This is not leadership, this is cowardice dressed up as caution, and it's a one-way ticket to a recession that'll make the great financial crisis look like a walk in the park. Let's peel back the layers of this economic onion, from the surface to the core, and expose the rot festering underneath. And trust me, folks, there's plenty of blame to go around, starting with the Fed, moving on to the government, and ending with the systemic failures that keep this vicious cycle spinning. First, let's talk about the Fed's obsession with assessing incoming data. Mary Daly, bless her heart, wants the Fed to stay in a central position and move agilely, but not abruptly or quickly. Translation: we're terrified of making a mistake, so we'll just do nothing and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Beth Hammack is over here playing economic fortune teller, assessing the outlook using scenarios, and waiting for a lot of information to magically appear in the coming months. Folks, this isn't rocket science, it's economics. And the data is already screaming at us. Here's the reality: the Fed has kept interest rates steady throughout 2025, despite a barrage of red flags. Inflation is creeping up, unemployment is ticking higher, and consumer confidence is plummeting faster than a lead balloon. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate hit 4.8% in April 2025, up from 4.1% a year ago, while the Consumer Price Index, CPI, rose by 3.9% year over year, well above the Fed's 2% target. And let's not forget the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index, which crashed to 65.4 in May 2025, its lowest level since the depths of the COVID-19 pandemic. But hey, why act decisively when you can just sit on your hands and engage with communities, right? Wrong. This isn't a therapy session, it's the economy, and the Fed's job is to act, not to navel gaze. By refusing to adjust interest rates, either up to combat inflation or down to stimulate growth, the Fed is playing a dangerous game of chicken with the economy. And guess what, folks? We're the ones who'll get run over. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because the Fed isn't the only clown in this circus. The government's mismanagement is pouring fuel on the fire, and the Fed's indecision is just a symptom of a much deeper disease. What's the disease, you ask? It's the government's addiction to reckless policy changes, like tariffs, that throw the economy into chaos and leave the Fed scrambling to clean up the mess. Take tariffs, for example. The Fed officials themselves admitted that potential tariff hikes are a major source of uncertainty in 2025. And why are tariffs back on the table? Because the government, in its infinite wisdom, thinks slapping a 25% tax on imports is a great way to protect American jobs. Newsflash, folks, tariffs don't create jobs, they destroy them. Just look at the data. According to a 2024 study by the Tax Foundation, the Trump-era tariffs, which, let's be real, are the blueprint for the 2025 proposals, cost the U.S. economy 142,000 jobs and reduced GDP by 0.2%. Fast forward to today, and the Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that the proposed 2025 tariffs could shave another 0.5% off GDP and spike inflation by 1.3 percentage points. But hey, why let pesky facts get in the way of a good political stunt, right? The government's obsession with protectionism is like trying to fix a leaky pipe by smashing it with a hammer. And the Fed, instead of calling out this nonsense, is just sitting there, twiddling its thumbs, waiting for more data to confirm what we already know: tariffs are economic poison. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter, folks, because this isn't just about the Fed or the government, it's about the systemic failures that have eroded trust in our institutions and left ordinary Americans holding the bag. The Fed's paralysis and the government's reckless policies are two sides of the same coin, a complete abdication of responsibility in the face of mounting economic challenges. Look at the data, folks, because the numbers don't lie. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, real median household income has stagnated since 2020, sitting at $74,580 in 2024, barely keeping pace with inflation. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve's own data shows that household debt hit a record $17.8 trillion in Q1 2025, with credit card delinquencies surging by 28% year over year. And let's not forget the housing market, where the National Association of Realtors reports that median home prices have soared to $425,000, pricing out millions of first-time buyers and fueling a rent crisis that's left 40% of renters spending more than 30% of their income on housing, per the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. What does all this add up to? A powder keg, folks. Ordinary Americans are drowning in debt, priced out of homes, and watching their wages erode under the weight of inflation, while the Fed and the government play hot potato with the economy. And the worst part? They have the gall to tell us to be patient while they assess incoming data. Patience? Tell that to the single mom working 2 jobs to pay rent, or the small business owner who's 1 bad month away from bankruptcy. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the risk of a full-blown recession. The Fed's own policymakers admitted in May 2025 that they see an increased risk of both higher inflation and unemployment, a toxic cocktail known as stagflation. And folks, the warning signs are everywhere. The Conference Board's leading economic index, a key predictor of recessions, has been in negative territory for 18 consecutive months, hitting 0.6% in April 2025. Meanwhile, the yield curve, specifically the spread between the 10-year and 2-year Treasury notes, has been inverted since mid-2024, historically reliable indicator of impending economic downturns. But here's the kicker, folks, recessions don't just happen, they're made. And right now, the Fed and the government are cooking up a perfect recipe for disaster. By refusing to act decisively, the Fed is letting inflation spiral out of control, eroding consumer purchasing power and forcing businesses to cut jobs. At the same time, the government's tariff obsession is choking global trade, hiking costs for consumers, and killing small businesses that rely on affordable imports. It's a double whammy, folks, and we're the ones who'll pay the price. So, what's the fix, you ask? Well, for starters, the Fed needs to grow a spine and raise interest rates, yes, raise them, to get inflation under control before it's too late. I know, higher rates mean pain for borrowers, but folks, the pain of runaway inflation is far worse. Just look at history. When Paul Volcker jacked up rates in the early 1980s to tame double-digit inflation, it hurt like hell, but it saved the economy from a decade of misery. Compare that to today, where the Fed's dithering is setting us up for a repeat of the 1970s stagflation nightmare. Second, the government needs to ditch the tariff madness and focus on real solutions, like investing in infrastructure, cutting red tape for small businesses, and reforming the tax code to boost middle-class incomes. And while we're at it, how about some accountability? Maybe, just maybe, our leaders could stop treating the economy like a political football and start treating it like the lifeblood of our nation.